I notice in your, from your comments, from your presentation, and it's on page 3 of the notes of your presentation that I'm looking at, there's a statement that mandatory minimums are contrary to the notion that punishment should fit the crime. It then continues on from there, but that statement is included in your presentation. And that's a, put it mildly, a fairly broad sweeping statement, and I would say a condemnation of mandatory minimums. What I would suggest to you, though, is that a fair assessment in regards to Bill C-15? And I say that from the perspective that many of the comments we've heard from witnesses have dealt with drug use and the need, and of course this is true, the need for drug treatment with those that are afflicted with drug addictions. But the reality is that Bill C-15, as I understand it, is focusing on the production, trafficking, importation, and exportation of drugs such as cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and in particular, when weapons, violence, organized crime are involved. In that context, wouldn't it be appropriate for mandatory minimums, serious sentencing, serious periods of incarceration to apply in those circumstances when drugs of that nature and involving those types of actions, again, importation, exportation, production? Would it seem in that setting that mandatory minimums would be contrary to the notion that punishment should fit the crime? I find that hard to understand that.
Questions?
Yes, it is.
Wallace? I'll do my best to try to explain it, Senator. The notion there are many principles enunciated for sentencing. I won't go through them all, but the criminal code makes reference to different objects of sentencing. But proportionality is always a feature, and judicial discretion is also a feature of courts in Canada. Mandatory minimums, research has shown, and the literature reflects the research, that mandatory minimums have interfered with both the notion of proportionality and judicial discretion, and in some jurisdictions has led to plea bargaining, reduced charges, and in fact some research has even showed mandatory minimums linked to increases in certain types of criminal activity. So the comment that I shared with you in my testimony previously is simply to say that if one of the goals is to make sure that serious crimes are addressed with the seriousness that they deserve by our courts, it's certainly far from clear that mandatory minimums will accomplish that. And in fact, there seems to be more research to support the notion that judicial discretion and the lack of, and the ability of the system to calibrate itself to the offense as they find it seems to be more productive in that regard.
But you would agree that mandatory, I'm suggesting you would agree that mandatory minimums do not remove judicial discretion, may restrict it, would restrict it to some extent compared to what exists today, but certainly does not remove it. And between the mandatory and maximum levels, judicial discretion continues.
I guess, Senator, I'm sorry. I only have a very almost a flippant response, and I don't want to diminish the proceedings by sharing that. But I think it's clear that that Parliament would impose a mandatory minimum, as it has in probably 4 dozen cases. I think there's lots of places in the criminal code where there's mandatory minimums. Parliament puts in a mandatory minimum as an expression of Parliament's will and direction to the court. And I think by definition that limits judicial discretion.
Yes, it does limit it. It does not eliminate it. That's the point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are you going to be down for a second round, or are you going to wait and see?
I'll wait and see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Campbell, followed by Senators Carignan, Joyal, Milne, and Watt. Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't know where to start. Well, I mean, the idea that this bill addresses serious crime is simply a myth. This is all about political motivation. But, well, I'll give you an example. Senator Wallace, who I respect gratefully. I sit beside him every day trying to support him. Great lawyer. Included every single drug when he did the litany of minimum sentencing except marijuana. And I, quite frankly, if he dropped marijuana, we could probably cut a deal on this thing right now and go home. And I don't know whether you're qualified. Mind you, we believe ex-Mounties, and I'm an ex-Mountie, you know, for some reason there's a thing about ex-Mounties that always know what's going on. I can attest that as an ex-Mountie, we don't, or always believe. But how do you rate, you look at the prison system, you see who's coming in, who's coming out. How do you rate cocaine, meth, let's just do cocaine, meth, and heroin versus marijuana? I mean, you see the people coming in, you see the people going out. I mean, are there a lot of serial marijuana killers out there?
Senator, I have to say that I'm really not in a position to reflect more broadly. The individuals that I am primarily interested in are those who have received a federal sentence, and so they're already doing serious time for serious crimes, and many of them, up to 80%, have a substance abuse history. And but I am not qualified to speak about the gateway nature of one drug versus another, or the...
Okay, that's fine.